Anyway, so this is Trump defying a court order would trigger a constitutional crisis, and this is in the Constitutional Accountability Center by David H. Gans. And so, as always, feel free to ask questions along the way. My first time reading it, trying to figure out what it has to say, and I'm not endorsing it. I'm just trying to see what's going on. Okay. As federal courts continue to issue injunctions blocking President Trump's effort to seize new extra constitutional powers, the Trump administration seems on the verge of making the radical claim that it may disregard the court orders. Quote, judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power, end quote, Vice President J.D. Vance posted on social media on February 9th. Trump called a recent ruling blocking Elon Musk, an unelected, unaccountable billionaire on a mission to hollow out the federal government from accessing the Treasury's payment system, a crazy ruling. No judge should frankly be allowed to make that kind of decision. It's a disgrace, he said. Yeah, so you can see that these guys are actually a little bit sophisticated because judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power. What counts as legitimate, though, at this point? Because the legitimacy, if what they did was legitimate, then of course the judges aren't allowed to block that. But who gets to decide what's legitimate? So it's a very, very weaselly kind of statement here. What's up, Valpo? How you doing? So, like, all of these statements are extremely weaselly. That's all it is. Kami Quinoa Club. Yeah, the power of the executive isn't specified very specifically. Yeah, that's part of the issue also in the U.S. Constitution, is that, a lot of things are specified in the negative sense, like everything not this is like that, or like, all things outside of certain things are then purview, like to like Congress or whatever. So, yeah. Okay. Continuing. This might be mere showboating, but we should remain vigilant. A federal judge recently held that the administration had failed to fully comply with its order enjoining Trump's funding freeze. The administration can disagree with judicial rulings all at once, but one thing is clear: it cannot disobey them. If Trump were to disobey a court order or permit his subordinates to do so, he would be at war with the Constitution's text, history, and most basic values. And this is the issue. They are going to reinterpret the Constitution's text, history, and most basic values. Now, legal rulings are based on what, as far as I know, it's called precedent. Like things that have gone before, rulings that have gone over, happened in the past. Now, this is what happened when we had the abortion rule change. Congress would ask the new Supreme Court judges, well, what is the status of abortion? They'd said, well, it's precedent, which kind of can be taken to mean that, it is set law, which it is, but until they make a new precedent, which they can do as a Supreme Court judge. So they were weaseling out then too. But if you can get them to reinterpret it, then there is no precedent. So. Okay, our nation revolted in opposition to the tyrannical rule of a king, and our nation's charter creates an accountable president to execute the law, and not a king with unchecked power. The framers of the Constitution created an independent judiciary as a co-equal branch of government, recognizing that the courts had to check abuse of power by the executive and legislative branches. As James Madison urged, quote, the independent tribunals of justice, end quote, would serve as an, quote, impenetrable bulwark against every assumption of power in the legislative or executive, end quote. The result is that in our system of government, no officer, not even the president, is above the law. Courts have the authority to issue judgments that bind the president. Indeed, the framers rejected the notion that the courts could be set aside by the executive. That would be fundamentally inconsistent with the independent judiciary's role in enforcing the Constitution and preventing abuse of power. Yeah. But of course, if you have a weak judiciary that says, well, we don't have as much power as we said we do, then this is just gonna, you have to have, people with a backbone. It's this is the land of the home of the free, land of the brave, or whatever. And if you don't have people, if you've got cowards in government and the judiciary, then you've got a problem. And maybe that's part of, our problem in America, is that we got a lot of cowards in charge. And it's not good. The suggestion by Trump and Vance that courts cannot tell the new administration what to do is not only a betrayal of one of our nation's most fundamental principles, but also is a radical outlier. The view that presidents must comply with court orders is widely shared today by virtually everyone, left, right, and center, including prominent conservatives who are some of the strongest advocates of presidential authority. Yeah, but Trump and Vance are not conservatives. There's nothing conservative about Trump or MAGA for that matter. They're, well, whatever they are, they're not conservative. Law professors Sakrishna Prakash and John Yoo, the latter is famous for his role authorizing the torture memos during his tenure during the Bush administration, have recognized that presidents must enforce and be subject to court orders whether or not they agree with them. Quote, because the courts have the judicial power and the jurisdiction over cases arising under the Constitution. When they issue final judgments in cases that involve constitutional interpretation, other branches must obey and enforce such judgments, that they wrote. They are neoconservative, says Kami Quinoa Club. I don't know what's conservative about them, and that would depend on, of course, your definition of what is a conservative. I don't see what Trump is attempting to conserve at all, except for business power. And that's not, that's more fascist than anything. I don't see them conserving anything, at all. So it's not the tradition. He just signed a court order making English the official language of the United States. We have never had an official language of the United States. There's nothing conservative about that. It's just oh, it was always assumed to be English. No, that's why we didn't have one. There's nothing that this is a radical departure from where things are. So it depends on what you mean by neoconservative, but I don't see it. Just from a naive point of view. Okay. Stephen Calabresi, co-founder of the Federalist Society, has written that a system in which the president held an effective veto over court judgments, quote, would be not so much of a system of constitutional government as it would be a system of rule by an elected Napoleonic strongman. Yeah, end quote. That's kind of where it feels like Trump wants to be. Past presidents have understood this as well. The Jefferson, Madison, and Lincoln administrations all agreed that court judgments were binding on the White House. President Lincoln despised the Supreme Court's ruling in Dred Scott versus Sanford, now widely seen as one of the most terrible court opinions in history, but he recognized that the president cannot simply flout a court order. Doing so, Lincoln recognized, would invest the president with tyrannical powers. In the modern era, every major clash between the president and the courts ended with a resounding affirmation of the rule of law. Even President Richard Nixon surrendered the Watergate tapes, which effectively ended his presidency. Kami says, neoconservative means spreading freedom and peace through strength, like Marco Rubio. Okay, so they are... Well, I don't know what freedom they are spreading at the moment, because Trump's not spreading anything except for crud everywhere. Now, Marco Rubio might be a neoconservative, that's fair, but he doesn't seem to be in charge of anything at this point. Yeah, it's a U.S. style freedom, which is freedom to be invested in and economically sort of cannibalized. But yeah, it's let's you have oil, then I think we need to bring you freedom. But again, in what way has Trump been like that? Rubio, sure, maybe, but I don't think Trump is like that. Okay. Trump and his lawyers are fond of invoking Article 2's broad grant of executive power to the president, but the powers that the framers gave to ensuring energetic enforcement of the law does not exist in a vacuum. The framers, who detested the unchecked power of the king had exercised, made sure to create an independent judiciary to prevent abuse of power whenever it occurred, including at the hands of the president. The president must obey court orders. Anything else would be a constitutional affront and deeply dangerous to our nation. Yeah, and so, that's it for this. This is a short article. That was it. This is just from the end of February, so a week ago, maybe? A little over a week ago. The idea that this sort of analysis just needs to be written down, that just says, look, The history doesn't follow this. The the past presidents and past rulings of all the courts don't follow this. The fact that this just needs to be like laid out in this like neat little package is a little bit scary for the country at the moment. And so it's like this deeply dangerous to our nation. This doesn't seem like a whole lot, but this is laying sort of like, well, these are the ground rules. Conservative Irk, what's up? I've just come from between the pages of Tolkien and Raptured. What are we doing today? Well, we were asked to read as a 50th month subiversary of Sin Semiotics. Just a quick article about the state of laws and Trump in the United States. Trump defying a court order would trigger a constitutional crisis. So we just finished it up. That's all. I mean, I'm not a legal expert. I am not even a philosophy of law person. And so I'm just reading this from the sense of, what actually, from my sort of naive perspective. So, yeah. Conservative says, takes one step into the channel, observes a Wikipedia page, immediately doesn't pirouette. Yes. Well, I mean, this is not a Wikipedia page. I mean, this is a Constitutional Accountability Center page. So, I mean, if you want to see the paper, this is the link. So, I mean, there's nothing. This paper. I mean, I don't think we need to like review this. I don't have anything to say about this. This is just outlining the history and the precedent of the separation of powers in the United States. There's nothing else to it. Viper says, I bet that by the end of this administration, MAGA will become experts on girdle. It's entirely possible. They think they're experts on lots of stuff. Kami says, do you understand Russia-Ukraine well? I've heard different takes by a lot of people on the left. I don't understand Russia-Ukraine well, no. I have a pretty basic understanding. I think I watched Shane McInnes's sort of background on it. And so I have some history, I think, from that perspective. But yeah, I like world politics is not, and history is not my bag. System X says, I think what I'm saying is the executive branch has an army and the Supreme Court has like a tiny police department. So I think Trump ultimately is the one that decides what the law is. And it's always been that way with every executive. It's just that the other one has had more foresight. Yeah, so if Trump decides to just start ignoring the laws of the country, then yeah, basically he's no longer president anymore because he's not bound by the Constitution if he ignores court orders. Now, what happens at that point, I don't know. Like, that would be, like, if he sends the army after the judiciary, yeah, then we've ceased to be whatever country we were. I don't know if he can get away with that at the moment, maybe in the future, but, it could happen. The girdle loophole. Oh, okay, yeah. The girdle loophole. Yeah, so the girdle loophole is, so Kurt Gödel was a very famous logician, mathematician guy. And the girdle loophole was that when Gödel came over from Europe, because he was running from the Nazis, and he was coming through immigration. He had an immigration hearing. And so this guy was someone who was brilliant with formal systems and how to manipulate them. And basically what happened was he started talking to the judge about how the United States could turn into a fascist dictatorship under using the rules of the Constitution. And the legend is, although it's not 100%, maybe it's apocryphal, but like there's some truth to it, was that the judge starts getting angry with him. Like, why are we going to let this guy into the country if he starts talking about making us fascist? Like, we don't want that. And there were two people there in the audience, there to support Gödel's immigration bid. One of them was Albert Einstein. And so apparently Albert Einstein spoke up and said, look, he's talking formally, like he took the judge's side and said, look, this guy's not out to create a revolution. He's out to play with formal systems. We're going to take him over to Princeton and try to do math. So it's like Einstein had sweet talk the thing. So, but that's the Gödel loophole, is that there's a way to make the U.S. turn into a fascist country within the bounds or the confines of our Constitution. System X says, no, I don't think he would need to send the army to the judiciary. The point is he would just ignore it. What are they going to do about it? Well, they can do stuff. Like, they can start, if not everyone's going to ignore everything that the judiciary says. So, like, I would think that, you know, if like the Supreme Court said stuff, we've got like state militias, different, like, it would get very messy. I don't really know. Serenade Swan, are we winning? I have no idea anymore. Serenade, probably not. I don't know. The girdle loophole was never revealed. No, I don't think it was ever revealed, but like, you know, people have speculated on how Girdle would have done it. So, yeah. The judiciary does have a small police force. They could send that police force after certain people, and they could, like, arrest them. Then what would happen? Like, could Trump send the army to bail out his political friends if they get arrested by the court? I don't know. Maybe that would happen. Yeah. Small Popo, yeah. So, yeah, so welcome in, Serenade Swan. We're just finished up reading this little article about constitutional accountability and how, you know, it's possible that Trump could defy a court order. We don't know if he would, but, like, you know, it's getting to be, he's threatened to do certain things. So, yeah, or, like, maybe not threatened, but, like, given sort of, like, his sort of a half-assed, you know, statements where he just, like, kind of talks around, like, oh, how could they do this to me? Since somebody says, well, actually, even the police department is technically part of the executive branch, but that's just a formality. Yeah, that's, they don't list. As I understood it, they listen to the courts, but I don't know. Conservative says Trump's executive orders have forbearance on the policy of administrative states of the FBI, CIA, the IRS, anything that amounts to a civil service, which will have the rundown effects of informing the law because it will be easier to legislate once that as an institution is actually working in cohesion with government rather than in contravention of it. Yeah, so, but like again, if the Supreme Court justices say no, what you said is wrong, then what happens? So yeah. Like, I mean, the point is that he has to, like, completely and outright go against them at a certain point here. And then what happens? It's not that, like, he's giving guidance on it. Kami says, I don't know if Trump has control over the army just yet. Well, I mean, he's supposed to, but everyone says that the army is going to ignore him. But, I mean, that's all hogwash. We don't know. Serenaded Swan says, in Britain, the courts can't tell the government what to do. Gig in Parliament. Well, I mean... yeah, I mean, we're supposed to, that was the whole point of being from, like, USA, is that we have it set up that the courts can tell the government what to do sometimes, because, like, we didn't like yours. Thank you for the follow, Serenade. Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, I'm not an expert in this stuff. I don't know how this would go down. Even, like... like what would break, like, even on some small thing. Like, Trump doesn't have to, like, break some grand order. It could break some, like, you know, some small little thing, and then what happens? There was a court case where, you know, the president was caught speeding in his carriage. It's old enough, I think. He was speeding in his horse-drawn carriage, and they gave him a ticket. And, like, you know, the president at that time, I think it might have been Grant, where it was like, yeah, I was speeding in my carriage. I'm not a king. I don't get out of my speeding ticket because we have laws in this country. Now, I could see Trump doing something like, I don't get speeding tickets. Well, are you above even the municipal laws? He would probably think so. And it's like, well, no, you're not. That's the whole point, is that the laws cover everyone. So, yeah. Kami says you need a lot of trust from generals in order to deploy them domestically. Yeah, I mean, he is firing people that, like, he's changing stuff up. Granted, he can't change up everything immediately, and can he actually get people that will follow him to do whatever he wants? I don't know. Probably not, but, like, yeah, who knows? Senator says the Supreme Court Police Department exists by special legislation, and they primarily function as security and bodyguards while on the premises of the Supreme Court. But after that, they get into their Toyotas and go home like everyone else. Yeah, okay, so it's teeny, and maybe not even like not even a police department, but just basically a very small security force. Yeah, so yeah. 78 Swan says, I've heard some people say that founders of the USA didn't intend for courts to have as much power as they do, but the loopholes were there to assume so much power, and they did that in the 1820s or something. Yeah, I see. I don't know enough of the history to comment on that sort of thing. Just, yeah. Yeah, like the bailiff says, Kami, yeah. I mean, that also makes sense. I thought they had a little bit more people, but I could be wrong. Sam X says, I think you're correct, but the thing is that was contingent on Congress doing its job and making it so that few rulings would have to be made because the law would be specific, but unfortunately Congress doesn't do its job, so the court is left holding the unfortunate power that it really doesn't want, offsetting a precedent and making law. That's fair too, because if you have a weak Congress, then you get into these bigger fights because you're not getting the laws that we deserve, you're getting shitty laws, and so, yeah, that's true. Conservative says it's not the purpose or in the design of the right of the civil servants and the FBI to act as a bulwark against the duty of what duly elected official, be the House representative Congress want to do. Yeah, of course. I mean, the FBI should not be making laws. It is in fact a perversion, ergo, it is not the administrative state or the Federal Reserve's place to act as a bulwark against the policy and intentions of the duly elected administration of the day. We've been led to believe otherwise for about 50 years. Yeah, so we've got a lot of bullshit going on in the United States. But, like, yeah, the people under Trump in the executive branch, like the FBI, should be following the policy of the executive branch. That's exactly right. And we don't want the sort of like the 1950s shadow government where like the CIA was like running its own like policy, regardless of what like the president wanted. So that was like bad. We don't want that sort of thing. So, but the question is, again, if the Trump administration does something that the Supreme Court expressly ordered him not to do, what's going to happen at that point? I mean, yeah. So Nate Swan says, not going to lie, realistically, there's always a class of people above the law. It just matters who it is and if they're good for the country. In your country, it's like people like Sam Bankman-Fried and people on the Epstein list. Yeah, I mean, that's the problem with the U.S. at the moment, or maybe for a very long time, is that people with money get to do way more stuff than people without money. It's like, that's just how it's been. Yeah. Laughing Jesus got the booty going on. Kami says, but Trump wouldn't want to break a court order unless it was very popular. Yeah, but he might want to do that at some point. And being popular doesn't make it legal. So, you know, he wouldn't do it unless he thought he could get away with it. It would have to be popular. But then, like, at that point, we've just, given up on a constitutional country. Because we've literally say, the Constitution is only, or the Supreme Court's only there when we feel like listening to it. And then we've got constitutional crisis. So, yep. I mean, the fact that this sort of like article has to come out now is this, like, it's just people are very nervous because it doesn't look like Trump is going to play by the normal rules that the country has been operating under the assumption that this is how we do stuff. And if he doesn't, it's like, well, then what happens next? And we don't know. So Nate Swan says, what if like Supreme Court orders are unconstitutional? Well, that's the thing about the Supreme Court. What they say is constitutional is what goes. And so that's like what they say is the law is the law. Like there is no such thing as the Supreme Court being unconstitutional. Like that's technically not possible. So yeah. It's like, yeah, as Kami says, they aren't ever unconstitutional. They define what counts as constitutional. And that also causes a problem because you get a whole bunch of biased people on the Supreme Court, and then you can like basically get anything you want to happen in the country because they are defining it that way. But it's not. But it's a good point because that's another way to advert the constitutional text. Yeah, I mean, we've got a very conservative Supreme Court, and so the direction of the country is going to, at least the laws are going to stay more conservative because they are interpreting the Constitution that way. And I mean, who am I to say it's right or wrong to be interpreted in that way? Yeah. Then the Supreme Court is the real government, says 781. No, they don't make the laws, but they get final say as what's constitutional or not. So there's, again, history and precedent, and so they're supposed to stay within only so much leeway. They're not supposed to make shit up willy-nilly. Now, there's, like, legal stuff around that, but, like, again, what they say is, like, supposed to go, and, yeah. Conservative says the Supreme Court is an institutional branch. It has remit to check government in upholding and in defense of the ideals and laws of the Constitution. Yeah, the national law is the Constitution. The only thing amount to a national law in America, which all states are bound. Yeah. flat. So yeah, that's the idea, is that they decide what the Constitution, how it's supposed to be, how it's supposed to be interpreted, and what they say it, how they say it is, and what they say it is. That is the law of the land. There is no them making something unconstitutional. Like that's like that would go against the definition. But what is justice but the benefit of the stronger? Well, the stronger, yeah, Thrashy Matt Kiss pilled, yeah. So, what's up, K-Pars? So again, like, is the stronger argument, the stronger military, the stronger what? What's going on? The stronger history, the stronger idea. Yeah. So the Supreme Court can't make the laws, and they don't make the history, and you can like, recall, like, there are methods to, change the structure of the Supreme Court if need be. So like, it's not that, and as people have been saying, the executive branch has a lot of like they do stuff. So if the Supreme Court does certain things, like, it might, like, if the Supreme Court said we had to disband the military, well, that would be weird. Like, that would be a strange thing, and like, I don't know how that would work, and it might not work. So it's like, yeah. Conservative says, no, it isn't. It only has remit. Its only place is to uphold the Constitution. Well, how does it uphold the Constitution? I mean, that's the question. They interpret it and uphold it. What does that even mean then? Like, what are they doing? If they say, well, this is the law, and then you have to follow it, can you just like what does remit mean in that case? I mean, I don't know these things. Like, it is a kind of a legit question from my side. Like, you're supposed to do what they say, in the sense that, like, the law says this and this is how it should be interpreted, and if you don't interpret it like the way they do, then you're wrong. Yeah. It has to come up in a specific case. They can't write broad statutes. Yes, that's right, Chucklemans. Like, yeah, like, you interpret the cases as they are presented to the Supreme Court. Bowser says, the alternate title, Trump defying gravity would trigger the alien. Yes, that would work. Kimo says, that would be wild if the Supreme Court decided that the military had to go because they commit too many crimes. Yeah, so, like, if, like, somehow they could pull the status of the military, like, outside of the, like, they'd say, well, it's no longer constitutional that we have a standing military or something. Like, I guess that could be a ruling they could make. I don't know how that would work, but, like, I guess that could be. It'd be weird. But, like, yeah. Serenade says Trump should become sole chief justice and the president Giga America. Yeah, so, I mean, that would just be king. So king decides what the law is, decides who, like, how the, like, what the military does, and so that just wraps everything all up in one person. I mean, but that's just, king. We try not to have kings here in America, but who knows what the future will hold. Will we have Caesar Trump? Like, Trump Caesar, yeah. The state is K-Pars, yes.